Hello everyone. We are joining with another episode of Unwrapping Economic Nuances, and joining with us today is also Dr. Sarath Rajapathirana, the Academic Chair of Advocata Institute. If you haven't gone through our YouTube channel on Advocata Institute, please go through and check the masterclass done by Dr. Rajapathirana on global trade. And we have been discussing on many other topics related to economics. And today we are going to discuss about everyone's problem, cost of living. Cost of living and inflation is our topic. Dr. Rajapathirana, thank you very much for joining us today as usual.
Yeah.
What is inflation actually? Because it's not a problem only in Sri Lanka, even in the US, everywhere you go, people complain, oh my goodness, high cost of living, difficult to live, cannot afford kids' education. What is actually inflation? What is cost of living? Is it the same or is it different?
It's the other side of the story.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, inflation is not a very difficult thing to think about. It's a consistent increase in prices, the price level. Actually, it is the way it should be looked at is as a macroeconomic problem. It's not if my pound of bread goes up in price, it's not inflation.
Okay.
But if all the other goods that we buy go up in price and it is a consistent increase, then there's inflation. So inflation is so high. High inflation means increase in the cost of living and makes it more difficult to run a family and feed them because prices have gone up. We have experienced that many times in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you made an interesting point. You meant just increasing the price of one commodity is not
inflation. That is totally wrong use. Yeah.
Okay, it is the price levels are going across the board. Like the prices of everything is going up.
Yeah, prices going up. That is the real macroeconomic idea of inflation. Meaning, when you look at the economy as a whole. So, if your price of bread has gone up compared to yesterday, it's not inflation.
Inflation.
Yeah. So people of course use it as a food inflation. Actually, there is no food inflation. Inflation is food is a part of the goods that you buy. Their prices go up together. So it is not food that causes the inflation. It is a result that the cost of living goes up when inflation goes up, right? And actually, the great grandmaster of inflation and understanding of this is Friedman. Milton Friedman said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So if you translate it in English, then it means that for the prices to rise, it arises from the monetary system, not by other things.
Interesting, because I think a lot of Sri Lankans, not only in Sri Lankans, everywhere, they think, okay, today the 1 kilogram of rice, the prices increased, and sometimes again it comes down again, egg prices goes up. They think it is inflation. It can be also because of inflation, but necessarily not one commodity prices going up is not inflation.
Yeah, in Sri Lanka, of course, it's done by
Department of Census and
Statistics. Early used to be the central bank when I worked there, some long years ago. So they decided to give it to the statistics. And so as it has been with them, and they do a fairly good job. And
Yeah. Dr. Rajapathirana, so is it reasonable to understand inflation is also increasing on the cost of living, or is there a difference?
No, it is same. Is to me.
Okay.
Yeah. It is a result of inflation. Cost of living goes up. This is inflation.
Okay.
So they are always together.
They are always
if your cost of living goes up, the inflation has gone up. Right?
Why should we worry about it?
Actually, you shouldn't worry about it if inflation is anticipated. If everybody knows that inflation is going to go up by 10% year in after every year, it is called anticipated inflation. It's different from unanticipated inflation. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Supposing I'm building a house, I know the price of materials today, and if there's real genuine inflation, prices are rising. So because of inflation, what I expected to pay for cement will be 3-4 times what it was before. So naturally, then inflation has a direct effect on allocation of resources, and it has to be put in a certain rate that doesn't create problems for not only cost of living, allocation of resources. Yeah.
So that means there's anticipated inflation and the
Unanticipated.
unanticipated inflation. Of course, the unanticipated inflation is disastrous because you really do not know which direction,
Which way to go?
which way to go. But
Yeah.
so is there a level? Is there a in economic terms is there a level that the anticipated inflation should be? Is it like 1% or 2% or 5%, or does it depend from?
It depends on circumstance.
Okay.
For example, if you have a history of inflation in the country, as many countries that I worked on Latin America has,
Okay.
To me, they do inflation is a laugh for them. They live in an area, in a whole system of inflation. Prices go up and, they manage to, they cut it some way and try to manage to, they reduce their budget, what they want, and then they go to and get another place to buy things from, and there's a sort of arrangement that takes place. So I think, inflation by itself is harmful.
Okay.
First, very simple reason, but people don't talk about it very much in this part of the world. That is simply that all prices don't rise by the same percentage.
Right.
So certain prices, certain goods are more elastic, as economists say, highly elastic. Small increase in price then get exaggerated, and high increase in prices is not allowed to work out in those economies where there's a tradition of price stability, where the tradition of price stability is anticipated, basically, I would put it this way. But when there's no tradition of keeping inflation down, shall we say, 4-5%, actually you want inflation rate to be consistent with the rate of growth of the economy. Because if you try to limit it, you should have enough money to contribute to run the economy. So there is unanticipated part and the
Anticipated part.
Anticipated part can be handled. They can take action against that, But if it's unanticipated, then it's a bigger cost.
So the next question is, okay, before I go on how to control inflation. So there's also, I think in economics it was taught there has to be some level of inflation which is manageable. Is it right to?
That's correct. But
why
actually,
is that?
Yeah, that is what I said before, is that you want the inflation, there's a relationship between economic growth and the inflation rate. You want economic inflation rate to be related to what the people are going to do in national income. So if you don't allow your money supply to increase, then the economy gets sort of limited because there are not enough money to do the transaction. So on the other hand, if it goes overboard, then some certain prices go up very high, others don't. And internally there's a real problem arises because by definition all prices cannot rise at the CC unless it's a very special case. So because there are different rates of inflation automatically taking place, then we have to be very careful to run monetary policy in a way that does not limit your right to increase output.
Got it. So I'm going to ask you a fundamental question. So you mentioned inflation is, as Milton Friedman wisely said, it's always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon.
Yeah.
But from what I have seen, a lot of governments measure inflation by a selected basket of goods.
Yeah.
So if it's a monetary phenomenon, why is it measured by the price increases of a basket of goods?
Actually, because there is no other way of doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, basket of goods is a very good idea. So basically, it should be the normal basket of goods,
right,
that people buy. Say, supposing we spend so much, shall we say, a year for a number of things, clothing, price, meals, various things, going to the doctor, paying the doctor, things like that. That is you start with a case where you start with, say, for a year, say 2000 January, and if it goes up by a certain percent, that's the way you measure it.
Understood.
But you measure it by measuring I know your question is, you are measuring those things.
Correct.
that people eat and use and things like that. So there is no direct measure of inflation. There must be because of the type of consumption by the people.
Understood.
Yeah.
Is there a way, Dr. Rajapathirana, by any, or like, is there an effort in economics by the supply of the, because you mentioned it's because of the monetary, it's a monetary phenomenon.
Yeah.
By measuring the money supply, is there a way that we can calculate inflation, or as you said there's no other way to measure it other than measuring the prices of those selected commodities?
Yeah, actually, given a particular pattern of consumption, so the pattern of consumption also changes. So you have to be careful about estimating your inflation rate because of that. And basically, countries do a very good job now. They know how to do it. And for example, our statistician has a sample of what has happened in, say, last year. So then they compare with what was there before and see the rate of increase. Inflation is always a rate, not just a jump or a fall, but a rate.
Understood.
So it's a rate inflation. Yeah.
Understood. So just to recap what we have discussed so far, we discussed what is inflation, and what Dr. Rajapathirana says is it's not just the price increase of one commodity, it's the rate of the rate of the price increases at an overall level. The relative prices increasing is the inflation. Did I understand it right?
No, not necessarily. There's general prices increase in the general price level. A persistent increase in general price level is inflation.
Exactly. Persistent increase in the general price level is what you call inflation. It is not just, loaf of bread going up. Is not necessary. It may be inflation, but it is not necessarily.
It contributes to inflation probably.
Absolutely.
Given its size in the basket.
Exactly. And what he says is inflation is always and everywhere is a monetary phenomenon.
Yeah.
And why we calculate it with a basket of goods is because that's the most reasonable way to measure it. There's no other really way to measure it. To measure the inflation, we really do not have any other way, right?
Yeah, easiest way to do it is the best way to do it.
To measure the price increases of selected commodities.
Yeah.
Next, I wanted to ask, so that's what we discussed so far. How to control it?
Again, we have the answer. See, when you say, when you accept the view that everywhere and always inflation is a
monetary phenomenon,
that means you have to control money supply. Now, there are people in this country, and like as in other countries I've worked in, they say they are monetarist.
Okay.
Yeah, but actually you cannot be a monetarist, because if money is the basis that prices go up because of money increases, then monetarist is likely epithet, they are monetarists. Yeah. Okay. So some people say wage inflation, this inflation, that inflation. That is used. So in our case, we have what is called core inflation.
Yes.
And headline inflation.
Yes.
But to run monetary policy, you have to have core inflation.
Right.
Yeah.
Understood. And now in Sri Lanka, yes, we see the headline inflation, we see the core inflation, we see the food inflation. I think, as you said, like there are different wage inflation and all that. But however, in Sri Lanka, we brought down the inflation to about 0.8%, which is deflationary. And also at one point, it was about 70+%.
70+%.
So how did we do it actually?
In the same old way. That is by a couple of things there happened. It is by money supply, limiting money supply growth, right? So monetary phenomenon is money supply. I think also they also began, which is a very good thing, but I see it, allowing more goods to come into the country. Mm-hmm. So that immediately affects the inflation rate. So there is a built-in story, but you should not say, you cannot say in order to control inflation we imported more. That's not correct. But it helps. It has helped in our case also. But it's remarkable to go from 70 to 0.8. Absolutely. Excellent. Actually, it was done in a way, as I noticed it, in a way that it was done quietly. It was done without upsetting anybody, upsetting any business people. That was a good thing, yeah.
So my last round of questions. Now you mentioned, I think we pretty much agreed, inflation is always everywhere a monetary phenomenon.
Yeah.
But there's also a conversation that money supply has no relationship with inflation, and there was this conversation about modern monetary theory, which I always tweet
Yeah.
against it, not for it.
Yeah.
And I think, in my view, we had to taste the bitter medicine by trying that, going, hitting the inflation about 70%. Just want to understand how this even come to, under what basis someone would think, why it doesn't correlate, or like why there's no causation between the two.
Yeah, actually, I have a published paper on it.
Okay.
When I saw it, I was really alarmed if people are going to talk about it. So that means you can print any amount of money, you can put any, increase the money supply and no effect on inflation. So let's do it. That is because the group of people who said, we want a home-based solution, it was their solution. It was totally wacko. It cannot be right. It's right sometimes in highly advanced countries.
Why is that?
I think because again it could be something like, as we said at the beginning, is that they are used to the inflation rate. So can you imagine that a country would, like Sri Lanka, if we believe in co-inflation, if you believe in modern monetary theory, then we dead on arrival. I mean, if inflation go up, to say it has no impact on the price level, it's very silly to start the thing. We did some careful analysis to find it has no correlation at all in Sri Lanka. Although people who was enthusiastic about inflation, this is what called modern monetary theory. In fact, the original idea that for the paper I wanted to call is that policy chasing economics. That it is not proper economics to think about it in that way because of the connection. I mean, Friedman is a great grandfather of economics, especially monetary. He is the accepted man on monetary economics from Chicago.
He won the Nobel Prize.
He got the Nobel Prize. Actually, I had just arrived in Sri Lanka, in US, just as he got it, and I listened on the TV, of course. He's giving this talk, inflation always and everywhere. He's a very jovial, nice man. So he's always and everywhere. So when you see always, there's no room for you to move there. Always and everywhere, right? And in this short statement, he said that is what it means.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajapathirana. We discussed today about inflation, how to control it, and why it affects all of us, and how Sri Lanka basically went through from 76% inflation and how we basically brought it down to 8%, and also
0.8.
0.8%, and also we lightly discussed about the modern monetary theory and the negative impacts of it, and I'm sure we all went through it. There's no need for further explanations. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajapathirana, for joining this conversation, and we are looking forward to seeing you in another round of conversation with another episode.